Welcome to episode 48 of the Rescued by Dragons fantasy fiction podcast, Tales of the Brunch Club. My name is Brian Messmer, and I'm not only your storyteller, but the dungeon master behind the homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign this adventure is based on. Please join me as I tell the tale of how my players and the dice ruined and improved my perfectly laid plans. But first, a quick recap. A terse meeting with Rajat outside of town led to the return of Alora's winter cloak, exchanged for information about the Fey touchpoint to the north of Tor. The Brunch Club agreed to scout out the touchpoint in advance and keep in touch with Rajat using their sending stones. In exchange, Rajat informed Alora of how they met, saying they'd become acquainted when the Obsidian Watch ventured into the Bloodwood. After making travel preparations, the party ventured to Root Run, where Salis took the group to meet Aggie, a beloved old gnome whom she had grown close with when she lived in town. After spending a night in the village and saying goodbye to Aggie, the group began their journey into the mountains. After several days of travel, Drusilla caught a glimpse of a shiny object sticking out of the snow, and uncovered a mechanical robot with a distaste for dwarves. The unit's name had the initials B-I-L-L-Y. Alora decided to name him Sam. Soon, they journeyed to an abandoned tower Pip spotted from the distance, discovering it to be inhabited by a pair of basilisks. Wary, they decided to send Sam into the tower first. And now, episode 48, Quick and Painful. Drusilla stared at the monster manual, skimming Fredward's entry on basilisks in hope that something could help prepare them for the worst. The information was grim, detailing the fate of those unlucky enough to lock eyes with the creatures. Concerned, she turned to face their new robotic companion. "Sam, are you immune to a basilisk's gaze?" "What do you mean?" the robot asked, perplexed. "Well, a basilisk can turn you into stone just by looking you in the eye." With vacant eyes, Sam stared at Drusilla, silent for an uncomfortable few moments before saying mechanically, "Yes, I am immune." He turned to face the tower, his joints creaking softly as he began to shuffle toward the entryway. An uneasiness permeated the group, and they exchanged nervous glances. Wait, Drusilla whispered, her eyes locked on the monster manual. The robot paused. "Weasels!" she exclaimed. "Weasels are immune!" Scrambling, Drusilla withdrew her bag of tricks, eagerly sticking her hand inside and withdrawing a hissing honey badger. It wriggled in her grip, claws thrashing angrily in the air. "Not a weasel," Diesa pointed out as she sharpened the blade of her axe. "Well, it's worth a shot instead of sending Sam to his death," Alora said, and Sam beeped in gratitude. "I'm going to beast sense into it." Alora reached for the badger, carefully poking the creature in its side. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head as her consciousness merged with the honey badger, which quickly went limp. Alora, now a small honey badger, gave Drusilla's hand a small lick as she set her down. She took a few steps, flailing in the snow as she grew familiar with her new anatomy. She stumbled, glancing up at her companions and squeaking as they stifled laughter at her clumsy attempts to walk. Eventually, she made her way to the entrance of the tower, poking her head inside to survey the giant creatures. Immediately, her beady badger eyes met the gaze of an enormous, scaled basilisk, and she froze. She snapped back into her own elvish body, gasping as she returned to her own consciousness. "Are you okay?" Jory asked, trying to hand Alora his Boda bag as reassurance. She waved it off. "Definitely basilisks. Our honey badger friend is officially a statue," she breathed. "Guys, they're huge. I don't know if we should bother with it. I'd like to make it out of these mountains alive." Solemnly, the party agreed, and they set to gather their belongings to go. "I guess weasels aren't immune," muttered Drusilla. The pass through the mountains provided some shelter from the bitter cold wind as the group journeyed, 6 days quickly passing. The nights were cold and dark as the sun set each evening. The group huddled around a small fire, picking at meager rations before retiring under their furs. When the sun rose each morning, so did the party. On the 6th day, Alora realized they had strayed off course, cursing herself for not noticing sooner. They'd lost a day of travel, and temperaments were wearing thin. As they corrected course, they noted the area they were in was covered with enormous hoof prints in the snow. The prints appeared to be left by giant, wagon-sized creatures. It looks like cow hooves, Alora noted, and Joy stood in one of the giant imprints. Cows! He exclaimed. What I would do to cook a big, juicy steak right now, with potatoes and gravy and just a pinch of this new spice blend I've been working on. Mm. The members groaned, all but Sam, imagining a juicy, home-cooked meal. If I have to eat another handful of dried fruits and nuts, I might lose it, Diesa complained as she stomped through the snow. Oh, the rations really aren't that bad, Princess, Salis joked. Diesa scowled. As the sun was setting and the group set up camp, Alora fashioned a small trap in hopes of catching game that could satiate their hunger. Morale was low, and it seemed only a proper breakfast could lift the spirit of the Brunch Club. That night, Alora took watch with Sam. As she stared into the cold, dark night, she could feel the robot's gaze on her. Each time she turned to face him, he quickly glanced away. Several hours passed before Alora heard a shuffling in the distance. Wait, Alora whispered. Do you see something? She squinted into the darkness, and there it was, a dark, gnarled humanoid creature with spikes sticking out of its skin. Another joined beside it, and they stared at the encampment. Affirmative, the robot responded. Moving slowly and keeping her eyes on the monsters in the distance, Alora reached over to Drusilla, poking her shoulder. What? Drusilla murmured, swatting away Alora's finger. We've got company, Alora warned. You saw them too? Drusilla asked Sam, who nodded. Drusilla sat up, following Alora's gaze into the distance. Where the creatures had been crouching before was nothing but an empty void, and several more hours passed before they returned. The long, lanky creatures rounding a bend and emerging from behind a giant snowdrift. Alora and Drusilla quickly shook their companions awake to face the approaching threat. Already alert, Alora reacted quickly, withdrawing her longbow and sinking an arrow into the creature's upper chest. She rapidly loosed a second arrow, which sailed over its head. The creature's shriek pierced through the night. Sam beeped and turned to Alora. He is injured. May I heal him? Alora stared momentarily at Sam, incredulous. What? No! Attack him! She shouted. Sam nodded and curled one of his 4 fists into a tight metallic ball. It detached from his wrist and launched towards the creature. The hand sailed wide, landing in a snowdrift. Sam hobbled closer to the beast, launching a second hand. It sailed through the air and collided into the creature's icy chest. The creature stumbled backward in momentary confusion. Salis raised herself from her sleep, yawning. What the fuck? She muttered as she stood, her hands already beginning to glow green. I was having a good dream, she complained, as she shot a firebolt at the creature, blowing him back into the air. The gnome then rubbed her hands into her sleepy eyes. Joy had thrashed awake beside Salis, his limbs flailing as he scrambled for his darts. Take this! He shouted as he tossed a dart into the abyss, which, surprisingly, ricocheted off the cliff face and rebounded into the neck of one of the beasts. In the same moment, an arrow flew over its head, and Diesa cursed her poor aim. A swirl of silver-blue light whirled around Drusilla as she cast Spiritual Guardian, the light taking the shape of a raven. With several graceful beats of its wing, the light swept toward the hideous pale creatures, clawing at their skin. Reacting to the onslaught of attacks, the creature sent a blast of frost in the direction of the party, hitting Diesa and Copper with an arctic blast. Diesa was able to fend off the attack with her magic cloak, but Copper fell instantaneously unconscious. Enraged, Alora deftly shot an arrow through the creature's eyes, and it fell to the ground with a resounding crunch in the snow. The remaining beast roared, and the group continued to exchange blows against the disgusting creature. As the fight wore on, 2 things became clear. One, that the beast was able to heal itself, seemingly restoring some of its own life force with each attack. Second, each time it took damage, a barrage of ice shot from its body, damaging within a close radius. Diesa drew back an arrow, ready to shoot the enormous creature. Wait, Alora yelled. You'll kill Sam! The robot was battered and frost-crusted from the onslaught of ice he suffered as the creature was wounded. Sam, having approached the beast in an attempt to get closer to attack, had taken multiple hits from the splintering ice and was beginning to short-circuit. A series of alarming beeps escaped from his armor exterior. Diesa loosed the arrow, shrugging. That thing was going to kill us if we don't do something about it, she yelled. The arrow shot into the beast's shoulder, and a barrage of icicles shot into Sam's armor. Several flashes emanated from the robot, and with a loud beep, he seemed to shut down, crashing into the snow and falling still. The giant, troll-like creature stepped over Sam's body and ran toward the group with an enraged snarl. "Oh, no you don't!" Salas said as she released a flash of green light from her fingertips, and the beast crashed into the snow at her feet, dead. Drusilla ran to Sam, attempting to heal him with her magic. Moments passed before he flickered on with a loud series of beeps, and she sighed in relief. He stood shakily and marched back toward the camp, plopping himself back down in the snow as the others began to settle back into their bedskins. "Fuck you, dwarf," he said to Diesa as she rolled to face away from the robot. "Fuck you, robot." Despite their late-night battle, the party still rose with the sun, groggy and sore from the fight. "Hey," Allura said, elbowing Drusilla, "we caught one." Several yards away from where they'd made camp, a hare struggled in the snare Allura had set, bright red droplets of blood sinking into the snow around its leg. Drusilla gasped. "Oh, poor dear, should we let it go?" The two glanced at each other, and it was clear they had opposing views on the fate of the winter hare. The two elves quickly started toward the trap, racing one another toward the hare. Allura dove an elbow into Drusilla's side as she dove at the trap, beating Drusilla to her prize. She grabbed the hare, and without a second thought, snapped its neck. Drusilla gasped, horrified, and Allura tossed the dead hare to Jory, who still sat groggily under his sleeping furs. The lifeless hare landed in his lap with a thud. "Feel like cooking breakfast, Jory?" Allura asked, and Jory took a swig from his Boda bag before reaching into his pack for his knives. Jory's hand trembled slightly as he skinned the hare, tossing its skin to the side and preparing to make breakfast. Drusilla, still aghast, paced the camp. Allura laughed and grabbed the hare's skin, slipping it over her forearm as if it were no more than a gruesome sock puppet. She turned her hand to Drusilla, making the hare's mouth move as she spoke through pursed lips. "Don't worry," she said, opening and closing the mouth of the hare with her fingers. "It was a quick and painful death." Drusilla gasped in disgust, cursing Allura under her breath as she stormed to the far side of the camp. I mean painless," Allura corrected herself as she let the hare skin fall off her hand and onto the ground. Well fed and in better spirits, the group continued their journey. The day was bright and sunny, but the air was crisp. All but Sam could see their breath as it escaped their lips, and Copper padded along silently beside the group. "Do you guys hear that?" Salas eventually asked. She heard a deep hum reverberating off the icy rock faces of the mountain. "I thought I was going crazy," Allura responded in agreement. The humming, right?" Deep humming pitches vibrated through the air, growing progressively louder as they continued onward. Mildly concerned, but unable to discern the source of the noise, they continued toward the peak of the mountain. As they approached the peak, the snow began to merge with pebbles and rocks, giving way to a graveled field of scattered scree. "Careful, this stuff will slip you up," Allura commented, her ranger experience kicking in. "It's like trying to walk across a million ball bearings." The party surveyed the ground, strategizing the best way to cross. Large boulders were scattered throughout the field. Opting to cross the top of the slope, they agreed to err on the side of caution and use their pitons and climbing gear to traverse. They tied a rope around Jory, who hiccuped as Allura secured the knots around his small body. Salas tied the rope around herself as well, handing the other end to Sam. "Wish us luck!" Salas exclaimed as she and Jory cautiously stepped out onto the slippery rock surface. Jory's foot slipped momentarily, and he gasped, but they slowly crept across the gravel field, making it about 20 feet before turning back to the party. As they approached one of the enormous boulders, they paused to check it out. To no one's surprise, it looked much like any other boulder they'd seen. One by one, Jory hammered pitons into the ground to secure passage for the party members behind him. They secured a safety line through which they hoped to provide a safe passage for the remaining party members, with Sam holding the far end of the rope and bringing up the rear. The group slowly progressed forward, cautiously advancing across the field of gravel. On several occasions the members slipped, slowly sliding across the field of gravel. Sam continuously drew the party members back in with 3 arms, his fourth holding a smaller rope that was secured to Copper. About a quarter of the way across the bridge, both Diesa and Copper slipped, sliding down the passage and crashing against one of the enormous boulders. "Filthy dwarf scum!" Sam beeped as he tugged at the ropes, pulling both Diesa and Copper back toward safety. A low rumbling sounded through the air as the boulder began to reshape behind them, rising to a standing position. The enormous rock creature glared at Sam, and the rest of the party stared back, fearful it may attack. The rock creature stood still and silent. In a moment, Sam slipped, dragging Copper down with him. The rope went taut against one of the pitons they drove into the cliff, which held strong. He slid into the boulder creature and gazed up at it. Hello, the robot said. The boulder grunted and kicked Sam out of the way. With a resounding ping, the piton dislodged from the side of the mountain. Sam, Diesa, and Copper began sliding down the surface, scrambling to regain their footing. With effort, they were able to regain their composure and slowly progress to the other side of the pass. The enormous boulder creature watched solemnly as they haphazardly progressed. On the other side, a second boulder creature unfurled itself, standing to face the first rock creature. "Oh my God," Drusilla whispered, as the two rocks began to hum. The deep noise they had heard earlier the day permeated through the air. Around them, 4 boulders began to levitate, hovering above the ground. Sam beeped. "Dwarf, we forgot something back there. You should go get it." Our tale will continue in episode 49. Episode 48 was written by Dominic White, Bethany Powers, and myself, Brian Messmer. The audio recording of our D&D game session that inspired this episode will be available on our podcast channel this Thursday under the name Brunch Club Live. Additional role-playing contributions to the story by Bethany Powers, who plays Diesa, J.P. Black, who plays Drusilla, Liz Richard, who plays Alora, Anna Flemke, who plays Salis, Dominic White, who plays Jory, and Billy Chase, who plays Sam. If you enjoyed the podcast, please help us out by sharing it with your friends and rating and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. We really appreciate it. More information about Rescued by Dragons and ways to support and follow us can be found at rescuedbydragons.com. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week to see what my players' choices and the roll of the dice have in store. So, it's almost time to stop, but not quite, so we're going to keep going for a little bit.
Brunch?
Brunch!
I'm very hungry after a fight.
It's your trip, not mine. If you want brunch, you can take the time to
Of
eat.
course, all we
What
have
about-
is crappy rations.
What about the
so.
snare?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did we catch
Did my
anything?
snare catch anything?
It did.
What is it?
It catched.
It
catched a yummy bunny.
Yummy bunny!
A little snow hare.
I'm gonna snatch it and kill it and cook it before Drusilla stops me.
I want to stop it, and I want to talk to it, and I want to make it my friend. And I feel really bad now that I see it in the trap, and I feel really bad. And it
This was all your idea!
I know, but now I feel
Can
really
Drusilla
bad.
and Alora roll initiative?
Yes!
We both kind of lock eyes with each other and sprint at the trap.
Oh, I'm using a lucky.
Okay.
Damn it! I'm a 15.
She wins.
Okay, so Alora runs over, like, knee slides through the snow, grabs the bunny, and snaps it neck.
Quick and painful. Painless.
Quick and painful.
Painful for
Yeah,
me.
right. That's a merch item right there. Quick and painful.
Alora locks eyes with Drusilla, snaps the bunny's neck, and just says quick and painful. Painless.
I'm gonna look at you
I
and just say,
apologize
I
to the
cannot deal
bunny.
with that.
No, you
Bunny,
can't.
I'm so sorry. This was my idea. I'm so sorry.
Jory offers to cook it.
Fucking idiot. Please, cook it. Do it justice.
Drusilla takes a moment. Praise to the Raven Queen that it has a smooth passing.
Get it together.
The cute and fuzzy bunny.
A quick and painful passage. Yes.
Oh god.
Did that come into my kit play at all? Does it have to? Does it not?
It doesn't have to.
Okay.
Okay, well, you guys have fresh
Ugh,
roasted bunny
I feel so bad.
over an open fire.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Alora's still giggling to herself.
What happened to the skin? Like the fur?
You skin it and toss it to the side.
Yeah, we don't have time to dry it and tan it. And all the things
we don't really
that
have
we
any
could
way
do
of
to
keeping
turn it
it.
into a hat.
Or you could turn it into our finger puppet.
I do that.
Oh my god.
Thanks for the idea, Drusilla.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Bunny.
Brutal.
Oh,